I still remember that January day vividly, the day my wife, Scarlett, returned from her 2-week trip to Bali. Standing at the airport baggage area, I waited with our 2 children, David and Sheila, alongside my brother-in-law, Dylan, and his daughters, Danica and Louise. The kids clutched a large, colorful sign that read, "Welcome home, mommies." Scarlett and her sister, Evelyn, had planned the trip as a well-deserved escape from the bitter Minneapolis winter, indulging in sunny beaches and warm ocean air. As passengers began streaming through the doors, the children erupted into cheers at the sight of their mothers. Scarlett and Evelyn looked stunning, glowing bronze skin, radiant smiles, and an air of rejuvenation that only a tropical getaway could bring. Scarlett embraced our children with love, showering them with kisses. When she turned to me, her greeting was a passionate kiss, brimming with promises. She whispered in my ear, hinting at how much she had missed me and leaving me with an eagerness I hadn't felt in years. That evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Scarlett made good on her promise. 15 years into our marriage, she still knew exactly how to ignite a fire between us. I was mesmerized by her confidence and allure, her sun-kissed skin a vivid reminder of her recent vacation. In those moments, everything felt right, as if we were reconnecting on a deeper level. But beneath the surface of that bliss, a nagging unease began to take root, one I couldn't yet name but would soon change everything. The days that followed Scarlett's return were filled with a mixture of warmth and restlessness. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Scarlett settled back into her routine, doting on the kids and sharing stories about her trip with Evelyn. But I couldn't shake an uneasiness that clung to me, a shadow that lingered despite her smiles and affection. It was a small detail that first planted the seed of doubt. Scarlett was meticulous about removing her rings when cleaning, a habit she'd had for years. But as she cleaned the bathroom one evening, something struck me, the absence of tant lines on her finger. Her skin was flawlessly bronzed, with no indication of where her wedding ring should have been. It was such a subtle thing, yet it gnawed at me relentlessly. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to paranoia, but the suspicion festered. That night, I found myself retreating to the garage, sitting on the workbench as my thoughts spiraled. What if she had been unfaithful during her trip? Bali, with its picturesque beaches and carefree atmosphere, seemed like the kind of place where temptation could easily take hold. Scarlett's beauty and confidence would have turned heads, no doubt. My mind raced with scenarios, each more painful than the last. I couldn't confront her directly, not without proof. If I accused her, she'd deny it, and without evidence, it would only drive a wedge between us. I considered reaching out to Dylan, but involving him seemed premature. Instead, I decided to investigate quietly. Scarlett was always active on social media, with an expansive network of friends and acquaintances. If she had communicated with someone during her trip, it was likely through email or social platforms. The next day, I left work early and installed tracking software on our home computer. It felt invasive and wrong, but I needed clarity. Over the next week, I monitored Scarlett's online activity. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. She was logging into a separate email account, one I had never seen before, under the username Dreams1977. Using a password that combined our children's names and ages, I accessed the account and found what I had dreaded: frequent, flirtatious emails with a man named Brad. The content of the emails left little to the imagination. They spoke of moments shared in Bali, hints of intimacy, and plans to meet again. To my shock, Evelyn was implicated as well, with messages suggesting she had been involved with another man named Steve. Their trip had been more than a getaway, it was a carefully orchestrated escape into infidelity. I forwarded the emails to myself, deleting any trace of my actions. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the exchanges, each line confirming my worst fears. Scarlett and Evelyn were planning another rendezvous, this time in Chicago, under the pretense of a shopping trip. My stomach churned at the betrayal, but my resolve hardened. Dylan was the first person I confided in. Over lunch, I laid out the evidence. At first, he refused to believe it. Evelyn, his wife of over a decade, had always been fiercely loyal, or so he thought. But as I showed him the emails, his disbelief turned to anger. "They've humiliated us," Dylan said, his voice shaking with rage. "I can't let this slide." Neither could I. Together, we hatched a plan. Confrontation wasn't enough, we needed to expose their deceit to those who mattered most to them. Scarlett and Evelyn's father, Tom, had been deeply hurt by infidelity in his own marriage, and his daughters had always been his pride and joy. If he learned of their betrayal, it would shatter the pedestal he had placed them on. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Dylan and I played our parts perfectly, feigning colds, working late, and keeping up appearances at home. Meanwhile, Scarlett and Evelyn remained blissfully unaware, giggling about their upcoming trip. They had no idea that we were tracking their every move. When the day of their Chicago trip arrived, Dylan and I dropped them off at the airport with forced smiles. Once they were out of sight, I contacted the private investigator we had hired. His team was already stationed at the hotel, equipped with cameras and microphones to capture everything. "Don't worry," he assured me. "We'll have all the proof you need." That evening, as Scarlett and Evelyn reveled in their escapade, Dylan and I met with Tom. It was a difficult conversation, but we showed him the evidence. His face fell as he read through the emails, the disappointment evident. "I can't believe they would do this," he muttered, shaking his head. After everything their mother put me through, despite his pain, Tom agreed to help us. He suggested bringing the children along to Chicago, framing the trip as a surprise family reunion. It was the perfect cover. Scarlett and Evelyn wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. The day of reckoning arrived. With the children in tow and Tom by our side, Dylan and I traveled to Chicago under the guise of joining Scarlett and Evelyn for a surprise family gathering. We stayed calm, masking the storm of emotions brewing inside us. The private investigator had already secured evidence from the previous night, photos and videos that left no room for doubt. Tom, ever the doting father, managed to keep his composure, though his disappointment was palpable. As we arrived at the hotel, the investigator met us in the lobby and handed over 2 envelopes filled with damning evidence. "Rooms 321 and 215, he informed us. "They're there now, with their companions." The plan was simple but devastating. Dylan and I would confront Scarlett and Evelyn with the children and Tom present, ensuring they had to face the consequences of their betrayal in front of their most cherished loved ones. We made our way to Scarlett's room first, room 321. My heart raced as I slid the key card into the door. The lock clicked, and I pushed it open. What greeted us was the kind of scene you hope to never witness. Scarlett was in bed, wrapped in the arms of Brad. Their shock was immediate, their movements frantic as they scrambled to cover themselves. Before Scarlett could speak, David and Sheila stepped into the room, shouting in unison, "Surprise, Mom!" Their innocent excitement cut through the tension like a knife, leaving Scarlett frozen in place. Her face flushed crimson as she clutched the sheets to her chest. What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice trembling. Tom entered next, his expression a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I could ask you the same thing," he said coldly. The process server appeared in the doorway, holding an envelope. "Scarlett Johnston?" he asked, his tone professional and detached. Scarlett nodded numbly, her tears beginning to flow as she accepted the envelope. "You've been served," he announced, snapping a quick photo before exiting the room. I turned to the children. "Come on, let's give your mom a moment to get dressed," I said, leading them out of the room. Behind me, Scarlett collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Next was room 215, where Evelyn and Steve were undoubtedly unaware of the storm heading their way. Dylan took the lead this time, bursting into the room with his children trailing behind. The scene was almost identical, Evelyn and Steve, caught red-handed, scrambling to cover their shame. But Evelyn's reaction was different. Unlike Scarlett, who was paralyzed by guilt, Evelyn became combative. She lashed out at Dylan, accusing him of violating her privacy and overreacting. The confrontation escalated quickly, with Dylan's temper flaring. "Enough?" Tom's voice boomed as he stepped into the room. "I raised you better than this, Evelyn." Evelyn turned to face him, her defiance melting into despair. "Dad, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Tom interrupted. "You've humiliated yourself and your family." The process server repeated the routine, handing Evelyn her envelope before leaving. With both confrontations complete, Dylan and I gathered the children and returned to the lobby, leaving Scarlett and Evelyn to stew in their guilt. That evening, Tom sat us all down in his room. His disappointment in Scarlett and Evelyn was evident, but he also spoke with a calm wisdom that surprised me. "This isn't just about them," he said. "It's about how we move forward, for the sake of the kids." The weight of his words settled over us as we planned our next steps. Scarlett and Evelyn's actions had shattered our marriages, but they hadn't destroyed our responsibilities as parents. The fallout from that day unfolded swiftly. Scarlett and Evelyn were forced to confront the full weight of their betrayal, not only in front of their children but also their father, whose disappointment was more piercing than any words of anger could have been. Back in Minneapolis, I filed for divorce immediately. Scarlett's initial defiance softened into desperate pleas for forgiveness. She apologized repeatedly, swearing she loved me and had made a terrible mistake. But her words rang hollow. The damage was done, and trust, once broken, could not be mended. 4 months later, our divorce was finalized. The process was surprisingly straightforward, largely thanks to Scarlett's father, Tom, who played a significant role in convincing her to avoid a protracted legal battle. As a result, I retained primary custody of David and Sheila, along with our family home, which I had inherited before meeting Scarlett. The financial settlement was equitable, and Tom even provided additional support, drawing from Scarlett's future inheritance. Dylan's divorce followed a similar path, though with more complexity due to shared property. However, in an unexpected twist, he and Evelyn rekindled their relationship months after the divorce. It seemed Dylan's anger had given way to forgiveness, a choice I could not fathom for myself. For Scarlett and me, there was no going back. Her betrayal had cut too deeply, severing the bond we once shared. Our interactions became polite but distant, limited to matters concerning the children. Despite her repeated attempts to rekindle our relationship, my feelings for her had withered, leaving only a hollow ache where love had once been. One day, months after the divorce, Scarlett asked me a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Jack, how did you know about everything? About Bali?" I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Your tant lines," I said simply. She looked confused, prompting me to explain further. "You always take off your rings when cleaning. But when you came back, there wasn't a single line on your finger where the ring should have been." It didn't make sense, and from there, the rest unfolded. Her expression shifted from confusion to stunned realization, and she nodded silently. Despite everything, I remained focused on our children. David and Sheila are my priority, and I've worked hard to maintain a sense of stability for them. They're resilient and full of life, and being their father is the greatest gift I've ever known. As for me, I've learned to find peace in the wake of betrayal. Life moves forward, and so do I. If you enjoyed this story or found it meaningful, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful and emotional tales. Thank you for your support.